All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual artist talk for our exhibition, Bark Rhythm. We'll be talking about Ugandan bark cloth paper and Indonesian bark paper tonight. My name is Anna. I'm the education curator for the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking. You may be used to seeing Jerusha's face up here. We've switched roles for the night, so thank you in advance to Jerusha for running the chat in the background for us. In the chat, please do let us know where in the world you are joining us from tonight, and thank you everyone for being here. For those of you who are not familiar with the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking, we are located in Atlanta, Georgia, on the Georgia Tech campus, and that is some of our social media there. It is our mission to collect, preserve, increase, and disseminate knowledge about papermaking in the past, present, and future. We have multiple permanent exhibitions, our main one being the history of papermaking. We have a small room for Dard Hunter, our museum founder, and then another wing on the industrialization of papermaking. And then we have changing exhibitions throughout the year, so we have a couple rooms for that as well. We host various education programs from tours to hands-on workshops and virtual lectures and workshops, and we have a lot of online resources as well. So to introduce our amazing speakers for the night, that will be Sheila Nachitende and Teddy Permati. And before I read out their bios and we get started with their talks, I want to give our guest curators from the North American Hand Papermakers a moment to introduce a little bit about the exhibition. They'll talk for just a couple minutes before we dive into the presentations. And so I would like to welcome Lisa Miles and Jill as well to the screen tonight, Jill Powers. So please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Bark paper and bark cloth have become a real labor of love for both myself and Jill Powers, my co-curator. We started thinking about this exhibition in 2016 when we first met at a Friends of Dard Hunter, which has been now named North American Hand Papermakers Conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico. When we realized we had this shared interest of bark paper, we started talking about how great it would be to put together an exhibition. And as the years have gone on, our ideas around this have expanded, and we decided we really wanted to include bark cloth as well and talk about the interesting crossover and connections between these different continents and cultures and these different traditions of bark paper and bark cloth around the world. It's really been fascinating to discover how the fiber and tools and techniques are so similar despite being separated by vast distances. So we're really pleased to share all of the work in the show with all of you. We're so pleased to have these presentations where you get to hear a bit more from the artists and makers themselves. So thank you to all of the artists involved in the exhibition. A big thanks to the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking and to the North American Hand Papermakers.
Thank you so much, Jill, for the brief introduction. All right, I am going to jump back to our slide real quick as I introduce our artists. So a big thank you to both Sheila Nachitende and Teddy Permati for being here tonight. For Sheila, it is the middle of the night, so it is like 3 a.m. there. So thank you very much for being up in the middle of the night when nobody wants to be awake to be here for this. And Teddy, it is the next day for you, so thank you as well. We're dealing with various time zones here in this presentation. So to introduce Sheila Nachitende to you, she is a multidisciplinary artist living and working in Uganda, Kampala. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in industrial fine art and design from Makerere University in 2005. Nachitende experimented with painting before exploring installation, performance, and sculpture. Her artistic experience ranges from concept and development to product and graphic design to gallery curatorial experience. coordinating art projects, participating in local and international workshops, residencies, and exhibitions. In 2017, she was a recipient of the Parent Residency Grant at the Women's Studio Workshop in New York. Nachitunde participated in the Kampala Art Biennial and the Kampala Art Auction in 2016. Her solo exhibitions include the Abana Ba Kintu at the Makerere University in the Chemistry Laboratory in Kampala in 2022, and Chapaka at the Women's Studio Workshop in New York in 2017, and 40 Twists at Art Punch Studio in Kampala in 2013. She also participated in a duo exhibition, She That Spreads the Winds, at Gallery Brulhart in Geneva, Switzerland in 2023, and presented at the AKAA Fair in 2023 in Paris, France. Her work is featured in the Magical Hackerism and or Elasticity of Resilience at the Savvy Contemporary in Berlin, Those Beings Not Being exhibition at the Alpha Nova and Gallery Futura in Berlin as well. And then Teddy Permati, he is a teaching staff member at the Indonesian Language and Literature Study Program and the Faculty of Language and Literature Education at the Indonesian Education University. Permati has a PhD in Literature and Major Studies in Philology at the Faculty of Cultural Sciences at Padjadjaran University. Permati actively conducts research and service in the fields of manuscript, preservation and conservation of written traditions and revitalization of oral traditions. He has served as a certified Pratma Cultural Heritage Expert from 2019 to 2022, and he is currently the Pratma Oral Tradition Preservation Worker, starting in 2022 and continuing until 2025. He began accompanying activities for the revitalization of Daulong as a traditional Indonesian paper in 1998, a work he has continued. He has participated in exhibitions and workshops, including the Padjadjaran University in Bandung and the Nusantara Literature International Symposium in Jakarta, and the Staatsbibliothek in Berlin, Germany, and the Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And if I butchered any of those words to my speakers, I do apologize. And Sheila, you are welcome to take over.
All right. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, Lisa, Jerusha, everyone. I'm so grateful to be, sharing with another tribe on the other side of the world. I mean, many times when you're creating, you think that you're on your own, but I feel like I'm at home. And thank you for this opportunity for me to share with you my practice. And thank you so much for all the assistance in making the show happen. So I'll give you a quick background on how I got to work with bark paper. It wasn't an accident. I'd been experimenting with different materials in my work, like the introduction said, I moved from painting, to installation. And then I started working with waste paper. So I did quite a lot of research and realized that paper is the fibers that, the paper industry highly depends on resources from nature. I started looking around my environment and what fibers I could get. And you can see that in my work, that is how I was working with waste paper, but I introduced bark cloth as was at that point. I tried to make it work with what was existing. And I was curious still about what could happen to the material if I deconstructed and reconstructed it into making paper. I hadn't found out the way how, but a residency in a Women's Studio Workshop availed me that opportunity to do the research, where I carried my bark cloth and went to a practical research. Tried to weave, create twists and 2D art forms from paper. And for me, then I knew that there was many possibilities with this material to transform into anything. I'm going to give you, this is another installation that I created with waste paper. and I'm going to go straight into the history of backcloth making in Uganda. Because of its cultural significance, it was added to the World List of Heritage by the World Heritage List by UNESCO in 2008. And backcloth making has been really historical to date in our country, Uganda, and Buganda specifically, our culture. The act of harvesting backcloth is called okukomaga, where backcloth, the tree bark, is harvested from the regenerative tree and then beaten, boiled and beaten into pieces of cloth that range from a foot to 2 meters or above, depending on what one desires. This backcloth was used as clothing before cotton spinning was introduced to Uganda or to the country. It was used as bedding and it was used in construction. But mostly it was because of its embalming qualities, it was used to wrap corpses at funerals. As you can see on the image I have shared with you, that is the Kasubi Tombs, one of the World Heritage Sites, where 4 kings of the Buganda Kingdom are buried. And it was constructed in such a way that it looks like a forest where it is believed that the spirits of the kings rest, and the backcloth is used to conceal, you know, their tombs and preserve their spirit. So that is one of the forms in which it was used in construction. But if you research online, you will see the different forms of dressing in and other ways in which backcloth was used. To date, artists still use backcloth as is, but my curiosity drove me to deconstruct it. Many people were afraid of backcloth because it was highly associated with death. You know, even to date, some people, when they look at it, they wonder and they marvel, like, how can you work with such a material? But I mean, nothing has happened. And as the world evolves, you find that there are new developments. And then in the way that I use it, it helps us preserve the culture and, you know, have some form of registration of our generation in how we have used this material. So this is the process of harvesting the backcloth. As you can see, the backcloth maker strips the bark from the trunk using a knife, and then at the top uses a stem of a banana plant to strip further and then take the tree bark of the tree. Normally, harvesting of this tree bark is carried out from trees that are above 7 years onwards. After stripping it, you see that is the exposed strand, very delicate. It is wrapped using banana leaves to allow the bark to regenerate for the next harvest. Then he takes the stripped bark. In this case, because it was too wide, as you can see, it was quite a mature tree, we stripped, we cut a strip and he boiled part of it and the other one was kept for another process. Meaning this fleece can give you wide and wide, you know, meters of cloth. Then he takes it to the place where the bark is, and after boiling it, it's taken out. And here you can see him with his sons specifically beating the bark with mallets. This practice was passed down through generations and it was a patriarchal practice. Women to date were not allowed to harvest or make backcloth. So even this gentleman who I closely work with comes from a generation of backcloth makers in his community. And then in the center, you can see the different mallets with grooves and sizes that are used to beat the bark to achieve the different size. And as you go along gradually, the piece will go on expanding, expanding, and expanding to a desired size. Here, the bark cloth pieces are then stretched to dry. One thing I didn't share was when beating the bark, it's beaten under a shade so that it doesn't dry. It's kept soft. When it's beaten, it goes on expanding. If it dries, it's hard for it, you know, to expand, to stretch. So he has to keep it moist for it to stretch. So here it is put under the sun to dry. We have different colors of bark cloth. We have the brown, which continues to turn when dried under the sun. It becomes deeper, you know, a deeper brown and a deeper brown. And then we have the black bark cloth. The black bark cloth is where this particular brown bark cloth is buried under clay in the earth for a period of time to achieve a black color. The longer you keep it there, the darker it will get. And then we have the white one that is harvested from another type of fig, like the tapa in South America. So once the bark cloth is dry, I receive it, and then my process starts again. As a woman, it's rather interesting that I revisit the same process. As much as we were banned from making, or still are banned from making bark cloth, I revisit the same process. I receive the bark cloth, I shred it, I deconstruct it, which is normally, you know, unusual, has been unusual. And then I soak it, just like you saw at the beginning. I boil it as well for a period of time after shredding and soaking, and I beat it, and that's what my workstation looks like. Those are my tools. I used to use a mallet as well at some point because of the knowledge that I had acquired from Women's Studio Workshop, you know, like the way kozo is beaten. But then I recalled that in our history, we used to use the mortar and pestle for beating medicine, traditional medicine, and it would turn into pulp, and then it was consumed. So I adapted the same method, and it worked. So I tend to balance depending on what textures I want to achieve. Sometimes I will use the mallet, sometimes I will use the mortar and pestle. And these are the screens that I use for paper making. I have different sizes. I could have used the screen printing mesh, but it's quite expensive. So I adopted the polyester lining, which worked very well. And for me, this process, you know, all through experimentation, I have learned to find alternative technologies by borrowing from the indigenous knowledge of finding around our environment what I could use. So there I am beating the bark using a mallet, and then I pour out my sheets. I don't push because of the nature in which I want my paper to be formed, the different textures and layers I want to achieve. I use a plastic sheet where I control the amount of water that the paper should have and form. These are some of the artworks that I have been able to make with my paper, as you can see. I've managed to sculpt, still adopting from the techniques I work with. I incorporate still other natural fibers like raffia, broom, straw, and I'm able to burn. Here, I make my drawings using fire. The paper allows me to control, the way I treat it allows me to control the fire. As much as it's known to destroy, I am able to control it. I am able to weave on that paper as well. And these are some of the other artworks I have made, layering and also adding the contemporary knowledge I have achieved. And these are also from the recent exhibition I had in Switzerland, She That Spreads the Wings. And yes, as you can see, I'm very interested in working with nature in form and how we relate with it. Working with this paper has also shown me that nature ages as is, just like we are. I mean, we are related in such a way, and working with paper has also shown me how to relate with people. I relate with it like I'm relating with human beings. Thank you. So Anna, you can help me play that video. My website is link there and my social media link. Thank you very much.
I can say I realized I was an artist much later in life. My name is Sheila Nachitende, a Ugandan multidisciplinary artist. I'm currently working with backcloth. Going through life as an artist and, exploring different materials, coming down to, say, working with backcloth, gave me more time to think and be grounded into nature. And the process of creating, for example, describing my process, I deconstruct and then rebuild something out of nothing, which is not only related to the material. When you look at nature, if even us as human beings, if you've gone through something, if you've gone through trauma and you need to heal and you need to rebuild, all these things have inspired my work. This process, surprisingly, I revisit the backcloth making process of beating the back, which traditionally was not a female job. It was a patriarchal job. Women were not allowed to make backcloth. Being a Muganda, my grandfather was also a backcloth maker as a hobby for him. I only got to find out when I was doing this, and then my mom revealed to me. So this material was mostly used, first of all, it was a clothing before the cotton was introduced to the Ugandans. And then it was used at funerals, to embalm dead bodies and preserve the dead. It's very historical. It's used in spiritual matters, in traditional activities, and it has loads of taboos towards it. Some people are traumatized looking at backcloth when they see it, but when they get to see my work and, engage with it, they won't even know that it's backcloth. Or when they find out, they're really surprised because of the next step I have taken to it. Through painting, I started exploring different materials, and I started working with waste paper. And during then, I realized that paper was made from fibers, but these fibers were around me. I hadn't seen paper from backcloth. So I was triggered, and I applied for a residency to go and do research on this process, because knowing that backcloth was really tough, a tough material, I needed to see how to achieve paper out of it. And when I took the residency, the practical research helped me get to this point. I came back home, and in my own space, I devised my own tools and techniques on doing this kind of artwork. There's definitely a difference in how the material manifests. The modern tools will give you a fine texture, whereas the traditional tools will give you all the levels of texture that you want to achieve. which got me to revisit the mallet and then also using the mortar to beat the bark. All this I discovered through experimenting and trying, and then I realized after doing it for a long period of time now that I do it in less than an hour. I'm happy to exhibit at Gallery Brulard with Dr. Nadia. It's really a wonderful experience, the cross-generational approach. And in this space, I haven't exhibited before in Geneva. I'm happy and proud that my work is going to cross borders. I would like to inspire people not to be limited. For example, with the existence of harsh winds, I want my work to inspire people to stand, to persist. Being an artist is really, really tough. And working the way I work is really tough. You have to be resilient. So through my work, I want to inspire, especially women and anyone. We all experience challenges. So my work is sort of, it can be rebellious, it can be inspirational, to give people an energy to keep on going, to persist and to be resilient, and also to innovate and remain relevant during these times.
Good. All right. So this is one of her exhibitions. Would you like to share anything about it, Sheila, while the audience is taking a look at it?
Okay. Yes, this is my solo exhibition, Abandaba Chintu, that actually gave, birth to for the audience to experience what I was doing after my research with the paper making from bark cloth. I exhibited in the chemistry lab in Makerere University with the intention to relate with the science audience. It was deliberate for me because I noticed the things that I was doing while paper making, some of them were scientific, and I needed another voice in establishing a language and a way in moving forward and quantifying the things that I was doing and mixing. I was able to relate with natural scientists, people who are working with plant material, people who are working with traditional medicine. And I realized that they were also needing for artists to relate with them in interpretation of their work. This exhibition was about the evolution of us. Abandaba Chintu is actually a proverb, a Luganda proverb that means the descendants of Chintu. Chintu is a legend from the Baganda, just like you see Adam, or he's the grandfather of all the Baganda, and we are the descendants. And I was interested in navigating and examining what are we doing since Chintu, who are we now? Where are we going? How are we relating with our environment? Are we nurturing it? Are we destroying ourselves? And for me, this exploitation of this material was a kind of conversation I wanted to have, to use material as a language, not only through artists, but also scientists and other practitioners. I tackled titles like, topics like human conditions, environmental conservation, and things about like the recent COVID pandemic and community relations in general. Yes.
A beautiful exhibit. Thank you so much, Sheila. So I am going to stop sharing, and Teddy, it is your turn to take the screen away.
Thank you for this great opportunity so I can share about Daluang paper and bitter tools from Indonesia. Thank you for Jill Powell, Jerusia, Anna, Lisa Miles also, and all participate. Hello everyone, greeting from Indonesia. Please let me to reintroduce both daluang as traditional paper and special bitter tools with non-ferro material in making daluang paper sheet. Okay, daluang paper mentioned in an old text manuscript from 9th century in Kakawin Ramayana text with old Javanese language and exists as a manuscript collection in many library and museum in Indonesia and also in other country. For example, this is my daluang manuscript collection. The left one's image is a manuscript from 1788, and I collection since 2002. Daluang called as Javanese paper or paper Javanese, by Claude Gouliot in 1983 in Archival. But daluang tradition is lost in 1960 because people changed to use the modern paper from the mass produced in many modern factory paper. Modern paper is more practice and also cheap than daluang paper. Because there are no activity in making daluang since 1960, the paper mulberry tree is not cultivating again, and the status is endangered. Not only the paper mulberry tree, but also the knowledge about making daluang is endangered too. In 1998, me and a little group in Bandung named Bungawari doing field study at Garut in West Java province to find a lost tradition and research how to revive the daluang paper making. We are lucky that our activity is supported by Global Environment Facility, United Nations Development Program. In 1998, we are succeed to documenting the daluang process from several sources, both from previous research and also from hair to tradition. In Garut, I rediscovered tree and also bitter tools, which were then taken to Bandung for further study. After that, because the daluang paper is as paper from the ancient tradition and have a unique in making process by beating, not by molding, I'm interested to redevelop and restore the tradition to live again in Indonesia. Also, now again in the world of paper. In this screen, 2003 to 2004, I'm learning process making daluang from historical actor at Ponorogo, Ibu Suparti and Pak Suja. So I learning with a vertical method from Ibu Suparti and Pak Suja. Okay, after research and develop how to grow up tree, paper mulberry tree in Bandung called saeh tree, it's paper mulberry. with the Latin name Brosonitia papyrifera. Daluang can grow up again in Indonesia. Still, field study in 2003 in Bali, Daluang using as Hindus Bali calendar, a special purpose for them, and also Daluang used as a sacred paper for the cremation ceremony, especially for escorting souls to heaven. Daluang in Bali used to for as a complement to the clothing of Hindu Bali religious leader. Daluang in Bali also known as Ulan Taga or Ulan Tage is a variant name from Daluang. Daluang known as Ulan Tage. And other province in Indonesia, Daluang also known as Saeh in Bandung, in West Java, Delancang in East Java, so many various names, but the common name is Daluang. In this screen, I will growing trees. I planted trees in several places and try to planting trees in pots, and it's working. And then I distribute the tree to several paper maker artists in Indonesia, especially recycle paper maker and some friends who were interested in taking part in revitalizing the tradition of making daluang. In traditional method on making daluang, for the first, we cut the tree about 15 centimeter from the ground surface, and we use the white inner bark. The inner bark in traditional method, soaking in fresh water overnight. After soaking, we are beating with bitter tools until the fiber is softened. We are used 2 pieces clean inner bark. After first beating with the bitter with the large pattern, we have 2 pattern in surface on bitter tools. Outer and outer part is glue and beating again until stick together. After that, the bark is washed with clean water and fermented for 3 nights until it becomes slimy and dried on the drying board. In the past, it was dried on the trunk of banana tree. Today, I dried with the board. This is the long paper packaging, with special purpose for religious ceremony in Hindu Bali community. And since 1998, I have regularly sent to several shops in selling prayer equipment in Bali, and also several religious figure in Bali. This is Daluang paper as art paper. As a paper, Daluang can print. Yeah, we can print. Also drawing too. Daluang paper as certificate and manuscript rewriting. Yeah. And then this is a picture of bitter tools for making bark sheet. Yeah. From the past period, this is with bronze material, but today I'm making with brass material. In this picture, number 14 is a bitter tool for making daluang, yeah, that I got from the book of the ancient paper making from Dan Hunter. And number 14 is mentioned from Indonesia or Java Island. In this screen, yeah, this is how to make daluang paper at Tegalasari in Ponorogo Regency in East Java province. This is a photo by Claudio Gugliot from 1983. In this picture is a huge collection Isamu Sakamoto in 2016. Almost these bitter tools used for making bark cloths and were obtained from Sulawesi Island. On the right side, there are two bronze daluang bitter tools from the past. This is special bitter tools, I think. In the large view, the two bitter tools are like this, which intersecting groove or lines pattern. I think is for smoothing the fiber, and the narrow line patterns to spread the bark into sheet. And then this is a sketch of the daluang bitter tools from Java, especially from Garut Regency in West Java and Ponorogo Regency in East Java. Still from this is from Rene Tegler in 1995, and I use as the basis for making the next bitter tools, yeah? The modern bitter tools with the brass material. This is the mock-up molding and brass casting. I made daluang was helped by my friend in Bandung named Hadian Wasita. He is a metal artist. This is the result of casting brass metal, which has become bitter tools. And then this is the machining process to create the groove or line patterns. I made two types of groove or line pattern, wide and thin. The wide one is for smoothing the bark fiber, and the thin one is for making daluang paper sheet. to make thin the sheet. The bitter tools I made from 1998 until the last time I made it in 2003, 2023, and practice of making daluang followed by several artists such Ahmad Mufid Sururi in Bandung, yeah, at Tukang Seh Daluang in Facebook, Faris Wibisono, yeah, at Faris Wibisono on Facebook. Also, Faris is a wayang beber painter artist, yeah, not only making daluang in East Java. Indra Srunggeno had a museum, the owner of a museum wayang beber Sekartaji, at Museum Wayang Beber Sekartaji on Facebook. Also Cardono, Datasawala, Rumah Deluang in Indramayu, West Java. That is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to both of our speakers, both Sheila and Teddy, for their wonderful presentations, and thank you to our audience. So we are going to begin the Q&A section of the presentation tonight, and I'm going to start both of our speakers out with a question while we wait for everyone from the audience to add any questions that they have for our artists in. So my first question is for item for you, Sheila, is would you speak a little bit about your experience with the Women's Studio and how that at the studio workshop and how that impacted your path into the bark cloth paper?
Thank you, Anna. You can hear me clearly, yeah? Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. That's a good question, actually. Women's Studio workshop really impacted my practice. It was like where I found my light bulb. First of all, it allowed me to focus on that material specifically. The team was amazing. I'm so grateful to Chris Petron, who worked closely with me and listening to my ideas and availing the right tools and research, knowledge, books, and people I could consult with on where I was going. Women's Studio workshop is very well, Bark Paper Studio is very well equipped, and I was able to also contextualize on how I would deal with my practice after being exposed to an advanced space. I inquired on the alternative tools and options. Women's Studio workshop has an art farm where they grow fibers that supply their material for paper making for me, which was really, really resourceful in prolonging that sustainable art practice that I wanted to have. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sheila. My question for you, Teddy, is what do you think the future of the Daluang paper is?
Okay. However, daluang tradition can revive today, but the status daluang tradition today is still endangered because not many people in Indonesia knowing about daluang. Just several people who interest in study in history or manuscript, knowing about daluang. For the future, I hope daluang tradition in Indonesia can be rising again Because Daluang is identic as Indonesian traditional paper. Maybe like papyrus in Egypt, yeah. Indonesia have Daluang. However, I think Daluang is a transformation from the bark cloths, yeah. Bark cloths using for pakaian, clothes, but Daluang have a special purpose for writing material. I hope also the artists Daluang paper today can recognize again in Indonesia and also in the world. So the artists can promote about our traditional paper. That is Anna.
Thank you. My next question is for you, Sheila. I'm not sure if you mentioned this today or not, but would you tell us how long does it take the Matuba tree to regenerate after the bark is removed and you've wrapped it with a banana leaf?
They will wrap the trunk with the banana leaves for about a week. And after when it is removed, it is given about 6 months for to help it regenerate and also manage not to overexploit. The beauty about that is that the way the motuba is planted in the gardens, because it allows for mixed cropping, they don't plant one, there are several in the garden. So when you have a harvest on this one, you give it time to really get back to it. But normally the banana leaves are removed after a week, and then it is exposed for a period of 6 to 8 months. Then you can harvest. But most people do it like for a year because they don't even think about it as another tree to harvest. Yeah, so
is it like a once a year harvest, or do some harvest twice a year?
From one tree, it's because there are many, it will be once a year. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean they're like, oh, that one, then they'll go to the next one. Yes, so it's once a year just to give it proper regeneration.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And as we still don't have questions in the Q&A, I'm just going to keep going with some of my questions to you all. Teddy, this one is going to be for you. What is the benefit of using a brass beater versus a wooden beater?
Okay.
Making your bark or your bark paper.
Yeah, in Daluang paper, we are using the metal beaters with bronze or brass material. That is because the bronze and brass material is non-ferro material. With non-ferro material, we cannot affect the paper with ferro. This very dangerous. Yeah? If ferro affected to the paper, it's become corrosive, yeah, become corrosive. With non-ferro material, Daluang can have a long-lasting, or maybe in another term, become permanent paper, yeah, become a permanent paper. Also with beater, bronze or brass tools is solid beaters, yeah, then wood beaters. This make easy to make a thin sheet. That is Anna.
Awesome. And do you use more than one beater when you're making your bark cloth? I think during some of our previous conversations, you mentioned that there's different ridge widths.
Yeah. In field study, I see many pattern, yeah, in bitter, not to pattern. But today, I use only two pattern. This enough from making a sheet of daluang. The wide pattern, the wide ones, yeah. This special purpose for making soften the bark, the fiber of bark, to make soften. Yeah? And the scene pattern, this is a special purpose for making a scene and making a large of sheet daluang.
Thank you. And we do have a question that's come in from one of our audience members. In Mexico, amate is smooth and polished after beating using an orange peel. How is the daluang paper made smooth? Is there anything done after using the beaters on the paper?
Okay. Similar with amate in Mexico, in traditional method, I'm learning from Ibu Suparti at Ponorogo. After beating, after drying, the daluang paper is polished, by cell or coconut, or not coconut, by cell, yeah. And become shiny, surface.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And my next question will be for you, Sheila. What kind of tool do you use to make some of the burn patterns on your work? We saw when we were looking at the gallery video, there were several pieces that you had these beautiful burn mark patterns. How did you do that?
Yes, I use skewers, different sizes of skewers with the candle. Yeah.
Wonderful. And do you ever use the bark cloth itself? Because I know you take the sheets of bark cloth and then rip them up and then create bark cloth paper, but how often do you use the bark cloth itself in your work?
Now it's been a while, honestly, because of the transformation that has happened and the daily revelations, like every day something new keeps happening, as you experiment. But sometimes you will get a commission and the person is specific to working with the backcloth as is, then I will do so. But now it's been a while for sure. I last used it like on my own, like my own calling. Like I really want, I think that's like 5 years now. Yes. Yes, I'm really excited about what is happening now with this journey, and the demand is also increasing for the paper itself. When I had Teddy saying that he also supplies to artists, I have so many artists coming to me, to access paper for their work. And yeah, that's where we are going now. So yeah.
Thank you. I have one last question that I will let you both talk on. In both our practice sessions and your presentation, Sheila, you mentioned that it is only historically men that harvested the fiber and then beat the fiber. And I know that that is different in various cultures around the world. So would you talk a little bit about what that's like as a woman making bark cloth paper? And Teddy, after Sheila speaks, if you would share who does that process is there any, does it matter gender-wise who peels and makes the bark and then beats it and turns it into paper? So Sheila, you first.
Yes, for me, making bark paper is like you saw, revisiting almost the process of making bark cloth is very, very, it's like beating a challenge, you know? And to some people, it might look rebellious because no one had dared to do something like that. So for me, it's also inspiring that you cannot know until you try. But I also understand why possibly women were banned from making bark cloth, because the process is really, really labor intensive. It takes a long time, and then the action of climbing up a tree, it was unheard of, women being seen going. And then instead of staying at home and cooking and taking care of the kids, you're out there, beating back. So in a way, I think it was because we have taboos in our culture where if they didn't want to tell you what to do, they would say this is a taboo, So possibly that was the reason, where they weighed options that you would not be able to fulfill your duties as a woman. But for me, it's rather amazing that I have been able to cross that bridge, and moving forward, it's encouraging other women, other practitioners in exploring ways of making, and not limiting ourselves to what people, dictate, upon us. Okay.
Thank you, Sheila. So Teddy, does it matter if it's a male or female making the bark paper in Indonesia?
Okay. In field study in Garut, in 1998, the Daluang paper maker is a female. Yeah, is a female. But if we are looking forward, the image from Rene Tegeler in Ponorogo, the Daluang paper maker is male. But I think it's no matter, who is making daluang. But today's the daluang paper maker is no women, no women who join in to make daluang. Maybe for the next project, I will invite it to them, to participate in daluang making. That is Anna. Thank you. It's inspiring for me. Thank you.
It's different in every culture. And it looks like we have one question that has come in on the Q&A, so I'll ask that one and then we'll close it out tonight. The question is, what kind of ink do you draw or paint with on the daluang? And do you use a pen or brush? So this one is for you, Teddy.
Pardon me?
What kind of ink do you use on the daluang? And what tool do you use? Is it like a brush or a pen or?
Okay. I learned from the manuscript. We can use many ink on daluang. Like this one, I collaborate with Faris Wibisono, to make hand fan. This is with acrylic, 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 and also we use fountain pen, pencil, charcoal, and many ink we use. But in manuscript, on manuscript, I was research that they are used the carbon ink. Yeah, in manuscript use carbon ink. Yeah. Today we can use many kind of ink. Also we can printing. We can printing. We can not only printing, also emboss, yeah, with emboss. So the artist can using daluang with many purpose. Yes, Anna.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to know both what is the history and what is the contemporary inks that can be used. I'm going to close this out now. Thank you both so much. I'm going to share my screen one more time. All right. So we have a few more things coming up with this exhibit, but if you're interested in programs like this one and you would like to consider making a donation to the museum so we can continue doing free programs, the link is listed above. And our next talk will be the bark rhythms, bath fibers and Mexican amate on Tuesday, June 18th from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then we have an exhibition reception. This will be in person from 4 to 7 p.m. at the museum. It is free and open to the public. Then we will have a bark paper and lace bark workshop here at the museum on Tuesday, July 16th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Signups for all of these are online on our website at paper.gatech.edu. And then our last virtual lecture with this series is the Hayop and Nui Hawaiian bark cloth, and I may have missaid those, and I apologize if I did, on Wednesday, August 7th. And that will close out our series on this bark rhythms exhibit that is so fantastic. And thank you so much again, Teddy and Sheila and Lisa and Jill and Jerusha for everything you have done, not only speaking tonight, but your pieces in the exhibit and getting things together for the exhibit, and Jerusha running the chat and getting the exhibit stuff together. So thank you everyone, and thank you to my audience for coming and hanging with us as we ran over about 10 minutes tonight with everyone's questions. So thank you so much everyone, and you have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Love you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Great talk.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good morning.
Good morning, that's true.
Yeah.